What I typically look for in anime, any type of media really, is some form of entertainment. I want to enjoy the free time that I dedicate to consuming it. Although gratification while watching it is just the starting line for my favorite anime. Obviously, I still put immense value in initial entertainment, but there is something else that separates them from other also enjoyable anime. It's the ability to evoke some type of change in my life, or my outlook on it. For example, Haruhi Suzumiya is probably what I would consider the most entertaining anime to be, but it also completely changed how I view media and what things I value in it. Honey and Clover is a huge reason why I decided to major in English, and in my last video, I talked about how Girls Band Cry convinced me to make this YouTube channel. I love every moment of all these shows, but my love for them goes far beyond the act of just watching them. These anime leave me with something in addition to a great viewing experience. This is true for basically every anime on my favorites list, but there are still a few of them that break from this mold. Although I don't value these other shows more, I also don't necessarily value these shows any less either. They just do something else. These anime reaffirm a feeling I already deeply felt, but usually lacked knowledge on how to express. These types of anime don't spark change, because we're already perfectly aligned beforehand. They don't shape who I am, they are reflections of what I am. Dead Demons, Dededede Destruction is one of these anime. I remember getting very excited when this production first got announced a few years ago. It was an adaptation of the newest manga by the legendary Inio Asano, most notably the author of Uyasumi Punpun, and this was the very first time one of his works was getting an anime adaptation. I hadn't read Uyasumi Punpun at the time, an incredibly foolish thing that I have now rectified. But it was a manga I had always wanted to get around to reading for several years. I've always been more of an anime guy than a manga guy, though, so I never committed to sitting down and reading through Punpun despite being interested in it for all that time. Seeing the announcement for the Dededede anime was extremely exciting for me. It meant I finally got to see a story originally written by Inio Asano and in the medium of my preference. Then the first trailer and more information on the project came out, and my hype level rocketed to the moon. It was announced that the adaptation was going to be split into two films. Great, a theatrical release typically means a higher production value, but that's not what did it for me. Far more importantly, to me at least, it was announced that Little Sakuda would be voicing Karode, and Ano would be voicing Oran, the two main characters. I don't think most Western anime fans understand how crazy this casting is. I mean, neither of these two are seiyus. Or maybe they weren't seiyus? You might not have heard of Little Sakuda's name before, but you've probably heard her voice many times. She's the singer of Yawasobi, one of the flat-out most popular Japanese music groups around right now. They did the first Oshinoko opening, Idol, and a bunch of other stuff too. Ano is probably a little less known to a non-Japanese audience, but she's also everywhere inside of Japan right now. She did this McDonald's song and commercial that got spread around the internet a whole lot about a year ago, and she has been super popular recently. Both Little Sakuda's and Ano's music is incredible, and they were already some of my most listened to artists long before this casting was announced. All of this culminated in making Dededede one of my most anticipated anime ever. It had a whole lot of expectations to live up to, and it crushed them. Despite that, almost nobody watched it. Dead Demons Dededede Destruction is an adaptation of a highly acclaimed and relatively popular manga by an industry legend. It has fantastic animation, insane casting, and less than 40,000 members on MAL. This anime adaptation has less than half of its manga counterpart. That just doesn't happen. Popular adaptations can easily double their source material and members after just a few episodes air. An anime having around 5 to 10 times its manga's members is average. Dededede has half. Half! For context, Lucifer and the Biscuit Hammers anime was a travesty of an adaptation, but it still has more members than its manga. Dededede has half! Half! So, what the hell happened? Why is this anime so unpopular over here? Unfortunately, this amazing series had a horrible Western release that slaughtered its potential reach. Remember how I said that this anime adaptation was in the form of 2 films? Well, that's not what we got over here. The way it was released in Japan was just not possible. These were 2 separate 2-hour films that were released just 2 months apart, and that's just too much to do for us. The creators still wanted something to release internationally, though, so they decided to cut the films up and reformat it for an 18-episode OVA series. They even added additional content to this release because they were able to with this change in format. This basically makes the OVA version the definitive edition for Dededede. It sounds like everything should have worked out perfectly, and it should have. Unfortunately, the OVA was handed over to Crunchyroll to distribute, and they could not have messed up this release more if they tried. The OVA was announced just days before it actually started airing, and it wasn't even advertised at all, so almost no one even knew it existed. For weeks and weeks, the subversion was horrible too. I'm pretty sure what happened was they were just using the dub script for the subtitles, so everything was all messed up, and what was actually on screen was always at least a little bit different from what was actually being said. A lot of people, rightfully so, decided to put the anime on hold after realizing this. The subtitles have since been retroactively corrected, but this was a major issue that plagued the series for most of its run. So much was done to make sure that the Western audience was able to watch Dededede, and a few stupid mistakes squandered its potential reach. I still excitedly watched it though, and I'm so glad that I did. Dead Demons Dededede Destruction starts off on a seemingly odd note at first. It has an episode 0 that flashes forward to a time when the world has already been destroyed. It follows Nobuo Koyama, Karade's father, and a character barely ever shown in the rest of the series, and it causes what precedes it to feel a little like tonal whiplash at first. A lot of people say to skip episode 0 and to come back and watch it only just before the very last episode, because that's where it takes place both chronologically and in the original source material. I think that's extremely wrong, though. There is a clear reason why these events were moved to the beginning of this story. They are thematically out of place anywhere else. At the series' core, it's not about the apocalypse or even alien invaders. Dead Demons Dededede Destruction is about growing up in an unknown and cruel world, and the connections people make to live through it. Episode 0 does spoil a lot of the narrative, but that's kind of the point. Dededede isn't about its narrative. It tells the viewer that the world will be destroyed by the end of this story, so don't worry about that. Focus your attention on the characters and their emotions. Even if this isn't the order we are shown these events in the manga, we are explicitly told beforehand that the world will end there too. Throughout it, this countdown will appear, saying when exactly it'll happen. This is also the case if you skip episode 0 when watching the anime. Episode 0 isn't here just to spoil the ending. It's here to help brace the viewer for it. All of the chaos created in episode 0 is left behind in it, though. Episode 1 opens up with Karade falling asleep in class and then getting lectured by her teacher for poor performance. After leaving the room, she finds some of her friends talking about a boy one of them likes. She finally meets Oron on the rooftop, and as they talk to each other about their simple lives, the music swells and we flash to the massive UFO floating above them. This scene is Dededede. There is a looming threat, but this story is barely about that. It's about life continuing on regularly despite it. Karade then starts to monologue about how all the adults talk about how everything has changed since this thing has shown up and the importance and influence of these events. It's only the adults that say this, though. As of now, in Karade's mind, the world hasn't changed all that much. She has continued to live a fairly normal life. She says, looking back now, I realize that no change at all is its own kind of happiness. By the end of this story, Karade will also understand the importance of the events happening around her right now. But what she's talking about isn't the invasion, though. It's her growing into an adult. The sci-fi elements of this story are important, but they're all background. It's used to mirror the unknown and confusing reality of adolescence. The first few episodes continue to be structured like this. We are mostly shown Karade, Oran, and the rest of their friends hanging out and worrying over boys and their future education. But we are also continuously given these smaller scenes focusing on the military or government officials discussing the invasion. There is clearly something very important going on in the world, but a majority of our time is spent on the leisurely everyday of our main characters. This all starts to fracture in episode 4. One of Karade and Oran's friends, Kiho, dies in an accident off-screen, and they only find out through the news broadcast the following morning. Shaken by her friend's sudden passing, Karade's carefree nature begins to fade. The only person able to stay unchanged in this situation is Oran. She acts no differently than the days she did prior. It quickly becomes clear that Oran too is struggling with Kiho's death, but she won't let it affect her. She has to stay strong. She has to stay absolute. Coming back to this part of the anime, after already knowing Oran's past, it's obvious what her friend's death means to her. But still, she refuses to let it get to her. After all, this isn't the first time Oran has lost someone close to her. Episodes 5 and 6 define what this anime will come to be about. Similar to episode 0, they show a reality that is so completely different to the one we were just in. Episode 0 was the future, and this new one is the past. Everything is warped though. Karade and Oran aren't acting anything like the characters we've come to know. Even from a non-diegetic perspective, things have changed. Most of these scenes are bathed in the dull light of sunset, and the aspect ratio shifts to 4:3, making things feel warm and nostalgic. This is not the same world we were previously shown. It is unclear what that means for the viewer, though. This new reality could literally be a fake, or this could be used to signify to the viewer that a major change has already taken place in a world set on stagnation. Turns out it's both, but we'll talk more about that a little later. In this place, somewhere between a flashback and an alternate reality, we see a standoffish Karade getting bullied after saying she saw a UFO, and a timid Oran too scared to step in, even though she saw it too. Oran instead runs to her brother, Hiroshi, and tells him that she saw a UFO and is now scared of dangerous aliens coming to attack the planet. Hiroshi comforts her and tells her that the best thing she can do to not lose hope when the world around her begins to crumble is to protect one person. She shouldn't worry about everyone, and that just one is enough. Everything that Oran fears will one day come true, but she listens to her brother, and that one person she chooses is, of course, Karade. This warped reality then proceeds to show how Karade and Oran first become friends. They bond over their mutual love for the manga and character Sobian, a parody of Doraemon, and the two of them get involved with an invader that has shown up long before the rest eventually will. Although Karade seems to be much happier now that she has Oran, the time she spent being bullied has corrupted her sense of justice. She ends up using the tools given to her by the invader to do horrible acts. Originally, the awful things that come from her actions were accidental, but they become more and more intentional as Karade convinces herself that what she's doing is justified. By the time she comes to regret her actions, it's already too late, and she realizes there is no taking them back. Karade already hated the world, and now she begins to hate herself too. She moves schools and homes, but there is no escaping her past. After a while, Oren comes to check in on Karade. but she is already completely broken inside. In this scene, both of them have different hairstyles, symbolizing the change they've already gone through. Oran ties her hair up in twin tails because she has finally learned how to assert herself and stand up for her beliefs. Katade's change is not so positive. She cuts her hair extremely short because she has already given up on life. As they walk up to higher and higher floors in the apartment complex, Katade tells Oran that she has come to see Asobion differently. She used to think it was mostly about the sci-fi tools used in the manga, but now she values its depiction of friendship. Katade wonders if her life would have turned out any differently if she had come to understand it this way sooner. She compliments Oran's new hairstyle and says goodbye to her. Katade jumps off the building. Oran reaches out to grab her, but in this reality, she is too late to hold Katade's hand. As she watches her friend fall, we return to the present. Except it's obviously not the present of the world we just saw. I mean, Katade is alive and even happy here, and a different character that was killed in that flashback is also alive. The invader even said that after watching humans interact, he's decided to abort the plan to have the rest of his people come here. If that was all a flashback, the anime would need to do a whole lot to explain why almost everything is so drastically different now compared to when it ended. Katade clearly didn't experience all of that because her switch in hairstyle was the signifier to her change in personality, and it's back to how it was beforehand. Except, wait, why is all that the opposite for Oran, though? After all, she still has her hair tied up in twin tails. And wait, what did that guy just say Oran probably was? After bringing up so many different questions and showing us all the harshness and cruelty of the world, we immediately go back to our characters getting swept up in high school romance. The bad days we were just shown are erased and forgotten about, and in their place return the happy ones. The next 6 episodes go back to how the early ones were. Slowly, more and more about the aliens and their invasion get revealed, but the focus is still put on Katade and Oran's everyday lives. We watch them graduate from high school, meet new friends, and even start romantic relationships. Katade ends up getting with her old high school teacher she always had a crush on, and Oran meets Oba, an invader using a human body. Oba ends up becoming an extremely important character. He's not only Oran's romantic interest, but he's also how Dededede divulges a majority of its information on its sci-fi elements. Oba is a character torn between both sides of the conflict. After spending so much time as a human, he started to understand them more and more. Humans can be violent and destructive, but they can also be kind and understanding. Oba also starts to realize that humans and invaders have a lot more in common than either side believes. It's eventually revealed that the invaders are basically humanity's predecessors. They lived on Earth before them and have returned to their home world rather than just invading one. And under their masks, invaders even have human-like faces. Oba finds it hard to fully sympathize with or ignore either side, and he finds this conflict and the mass amount of casualties that will come from it to feel unnecessary. Oba eventually starts to stop seeing himself as part of either side of the conflict and more of an individual. He ends up falling in love with Oran because she is so individualistic. She doesn't care what other people think of her, always speaks her mind, and is willing to go against the grain. Oran won't hesitate to be the enemy of humanity if she feels like she needs to be. This way of thinking all stems from her past experiences, whether Oran remembers them or not. As the anime continues, it starts to become more and more clear that there is something different about Oran specifically, but the anime stays with its slice-of-life structure anyways. As the impending destruction of the planet approaches, answers become needed. Episode 13 finally shows what the first 12 have been avoiding, and further explains the connections Katade and Oran have to the invasion. This episode recontextualizes Dededede, and it stands as one of my favorite things I have ever watched. It's finally revealed who Oron is, someone from a different timeline. The timeline she comes from is the one we were shown in episodes 5 and 6, the one where Karade commits suicide. After all this time, we get to go back and see what happened after Karade jumped. With Karade gone, the one person that meant everything to her, Oron is left broken. Seeing the state Oron is in, the invader offers his only solution to her. He can overwrite her consciousness onto another timeline, so she can restart her relationship with Karade and hopefully change how events will play out. The invader warns Oron that doing this is unwise, though, as it could very likely lead to the destruction of the planet in that timeline. It was their actions that convinced him to call off the invasion, and erasing them could result in a world-ending catastrophe. Without the slightest bit of hesitation, Oron accepts. She listens to the advice her brother once gave to her. When the world around her begins to crumble, she should protect just one person. Karade is Oron's entire world, and she'll do anything to protect her, even if that means acting like a demon to the rest of humanity. In the scene, the invader comments on how he believes that a human sense of justice is a mental illness that all of them tend to share. When someone follows their own individual idea of justice instead of what is best for everyone as a whole, it leads down a path to hell. Despite criticizing humanity in this way, the invader still tells Oron how to change timelines. Although he has no reason to do this outside of following his own sense of justice. Even though he acknowledges the foolishness of his own actions, he still assists Oron, showing the similarities between humans and invaders. How could he not help Oron? How can Oron be wrong for wanting to save her friend? Oron is forced to make a decision. Give up on protecting the world, or give up on protecting her world. She doesn't run away from her situation, though, instead facing it head on. Something her past self struggled to do, but also something incredibly characteristic of the future Oron we've already come to know. With her resolve set, the invader takes Oron and the accompanying Hiroshi to his ship. As Oron gets ready to leave, Hiroshi offers her one more piece of advice. In order to change your destiny, you must also change. If she stays the same, almost everything that happened will just repeat itself. With a final goodbye, Oron transfers timelines. It's unclear how much she remembers in the process, though. She is immediately shown waking up and saying that she feels like she had a really strange dream, although she still ties her hair up in twin tails, showing that even if she doesn't remember everything, she has still undergone fundamental change. Shortly after she arrives, Oron finds herself at a pivotal moment once again. She watches as Karade gets bullied after claiming she saw a UFO. Oron knows that she's telling the truth because she saw it too, but the last time she was here, Oron chose to walk away without saying anything. She was originally too timid, and despite wanting to be able to step in, she feared facing the same ridicule and treatment as Karade. This isn't the same Oron as last time, though. The words Hiroshi gave to her before coming to this timeline echo through her head. Change your destiny. In order to save Karade, you must also change. The music starts to pick up, and the aspect ratio slowly expands as Oron crosses into the classroom. This moment causes the timeline to shift to the future we're familiar with. Oron jumps between Karade and her bullies and shouts how none of them understand. She tells them all that the UFO is nothing to worry about, and the real threat to everyone is her. Whether Oron knows it or not, what she is saying is completely true. Oron's actions in this very moment is what will eventually lead to the destruction of the entire planet. Gone is the timid and shy Oron from these flashbacks, and in her place is the energetic and confident Oron we know. And this changed version of her is able to save her friend. After this, Karade and Oron are shown hanging out and living carefree lives. In the timeline where Karade committed suicide, Oron was too late to take her hand, but not this time. The pair are shown walking towards their now bright future, side by side, holding each other's hands. It's still left unclear whether or not Oran remembers that other timeline at all, though. The now happy Karade comments on how she wishes Asobion would appear with his time machine so she can use it to finish her homework. Oran calls her foolish for not being able to distinguish between fiction and reality and tells her there is no such thing as a time machine. Is she saying this because she truly believes it, or because she is trying to hide her actions from Karade to take full responsibility for them? Although it might seem like she barely remembers anything at all, there are little pieces of the story that say otherwise. There are plenty of deja vu-like moments where it feels like this might be the case. One is even immediately after this in the same scene, where Oran pauses for a moment after telling Karade that she is absolute. She also remembered Hiroshi's advice before jumping in to help Karade, and even back in episode 1, Oran vaguely remembers what Karade's face looked like right before she committed suicide, after watching her look up at the night sky. Oran is always saying that she'll be the true hidden antagonist of humanity too, and that's basically what she is. Exactly how much Oran remembers is never answered. Dead Demons Dededede Destruction leaves it this way on purpose. It doesn't matter. This version of Oran would always intervene on that day to help Karade. She wouldn't stop out of fear of being bullied or ridiculed, and she wouldn't stop because stepping in could mean the destruction of the planet. The Oran that walked away no longer exists. This Oran will always follow her own sense of justice, and, more than anything, she will always be there to protect Karade. Because, to her, she is absolute. With everything finally explained, we return to the present. Oba frantically searches an early morning seaside town for Oran. He's afraid that she has regained all of her memories and might attempt to jump timelines again. Oba finds her on the beach and quickly realizes he never had any reason to worry. In fact, she was actually just lecturing her friend about the importance of never abandoning responsibility. Oran, this Oran, isn't the type of person to ever run away. She tells Oba, "I'm not going anywhere. As long as everyone's here, I'll be here too." These words solidify Oba's feelings for Oran. Switching timelines was never Oran escaping from reality. It was her continuing to fight back against it. After fully realizing the extent of Oran's resolve, Oba finds his own. He'll follow his own sense of justice and fight to protect both humanities and invaders from their impending doom. Overwhelmed by his love for her, Oba suddenly kisses Oran. Episode 13 is a masterpiece. It's thrilling, emotional, and recontextualizes everything. It turns Oran, a character that I already loved, into one of my favorite characters in all of anime, and just about brings me to tears every time that I watch it. But now, with so much finally explained, we move into the final act. Oba's character takes center stage. He'll be the one who attempts to save everyone, but it's looking more and more grim as time goes on. Oba knows that it'll be difficult, but he's still set on stopping the catastrophe. He gives his everything to prevent it, even powering through immense physical harm, but it's not enough. Although he's able to stop the total end of the planet, the invader's mothership can't be prevented from exploding. In episode 16, we watch the characters we've come to know go about their final moments before the disaster. Many of them will be killed, and those who survive will have their lives completely warped. Karade and Oran have a conversation about their future and some of their different relationships and what each means to them. After some of her actions are questioned by Oran, Karade responds with, "But I'm enjoying each day." Their lives might have some bumps throughout it, and they definitely won't always make the smartest decisions. But what's important is that they can still enjoy their lives along the way. Things won't always work out perfectly, but that's okay. Seemingly out of nowhere, Oran asks Karade, What would you do if the world were to end and it was my fault? Karade says, I guess that's okay. Even if every person in the world became your enemy, I will still be on your side. Because Anton, you are absolute. Just like how she chose to stay by her side, Karade affirms that she will stay by Oran's, even if that means going against the rest of humanity. Oran is absolute to Karade, and Karade is absolute to Oran. The two of them will always be together. Peppy idol music starts to play on nearby loudspeakers. Oran kisses Karade, but after a moment of shared happiness, their pasts finally catch up to them. The idol song shifts to be all that we hear, and then, finally, the invader's mothership explodes. We watch as the place Karade and Oran call home is blown to dust, and with it, so many important people to them as well. The characters caught up in the explosion show acceptance. There is nothing they can do. The characters on the outside show despair. They watch as their entire lives are destroyed. Karade and Oran just feel relief. This is a direct result of their own actions and past, whether they fully know it or not. Previously, when their world began to crumble, they struggled to fight against it head on. Karade ended her life, and Oran switched timelines to start over. They weren't able to handle the end of the world. This time's different, though. Not only do they have each other now, but they have also had the time to learn about and come to love themselves. They've grown into adults, and now know they're able to face whatever adversity life throws at them as long as the other stands by their side. In the aftermath of the explosion, we find Oba floating above the destroyed city that he just fought so hard to protect. He's approached by some military people here to save him. As one of them reaches out from the helicopter, he shouts, Your hand. Make an effort to stretch out your arm. You've gotta live. Oba won't survive this situation by himself. He needs to reach out for someone else. Even though he's in too much despair to even speak, he manages to hold out his arm, currently the most damaged piece of himself. Injured and on the brink of death, Oba takes the other person's hand. We return to Karade and Oran, watching the Pillar of Light. Together they say, We are alive, and we will continue living, so long as you remain by my side. Dead Demons Dededede Destruction lays out its main theme. Life can be hard and even grueling at times, so hold someone else's hand through all of it. Be there for someone else, and let someone else be there for you. With this powerful message, the story ends. Well, it basically ends. There is one more episode that takes place after a massive time skip to show how some things eventually happen and answer a few questions. The final episode returns to the future we saw in episode 0. Looking back now, it's a lot easier to see why the events in episode 0 were moved to the beginning of the story. Stuffing an entire large plotline after the narrative climax and before the final resolution would greatly lessen the impact of this ending, especially when that plotline is so tonally different to the rest of the story. Showing it as an episode 0 gives the viewer all the same information, and it even serves as a strong hook. I understand it's not like this in the manga, but in my opinion at least, it works so much better the way the anime handled it. This lets episode 17 start at the point where Karade's father, Nobuo, is talking to one of his daughter's old friends. She tells him all about the parts of Karade's life that he ended up missing, and all the world events he wasn't around for. She also says that, sadly, both Karade and Oran are likely already dead. However, she suggests that he shift to a different timeline to change that. Nobuo will do anything to rescue and be with his daughter, so he agrees to go. If you don't count episode 0, we spend just 12 minutes in this future. In such a short amount of time, we are given quite a few answers, but are left with so many questions. Dead Demon's Dededede destruction purposely leaves so many things about this future unknown because this part is mostly irrelevant to the story it's telling. There is a story and possible future out there that follows Karade and Oran fighting in mechas in an apocalyptic world, and they're probably even lovers there. That's not our story, though. The reason the events of Episode 0 get moved is because it doesn't belong here. The information and context it provides is valuable, but it shouldn't come at the cost of interrupting the ending. Sectioning it off and moving it to the beginning is a genius way the anime can have its cake and eat it too. All that's needed is to flash to this future briefly so that we understand what it is Nobuo is trying to prevent. We don't belong here, and neither does he. Nobuo's world revolves around Karre, so just like Oran, he switches timelines in order to protect her. As Nobuo enters the new timeline, he says, Karre, I'm home. He's finally back to where he belongs, next to his daughter's side. Although the timeline Nobuo finds himself in ends up being a completely new one. After waking up, he looks at his bookshelf and sees that Asobion has become Zundachi. It's different, but still very similar. Just moments after coming here, Nobuo is able to prevent the future he came from. He simply tells Karade to try talking with one of her classmates named Oran, because he's sure that it'll change her world. She doesn't need to go through life alone, and this time around, she doesn't. Throughout the story of Dededede, Karade and Oran are positioned as the enemies of the world. When they were alone, they were outcasted. Karade was bullied, and Oran was unable to make any friends. They found solace in each other because they were able to find someone similar to themselves. Despite what they felt, neither of them were ever truly alone, though. Nobuo always stood by Karade's side, and similarly, Hiroshi was always there for Oran. Their entire lives, they both had at least someone looking out for them. In my opinion, Nobuo and Hiroshi serve a crucial role in the story. They are both adults looking out for children, and they are each an example of the type of person Karade and Oran should strive to become. Dead Demons, Dededede Destruction is ultimately about growing up and persevering through life. It's supposed to be optimistic, and the world it takes place in shouldn't be all bad. Hiroshi does so much to help and teach Oran, and Nobuo goes through hell to literally create a timeline where Karade gets to live happily. In this new timeline we now find ourselves in, there is no invasion, no encounter with aliens at all, and no sadness to work through. Instead, we're shown glimpses of Karade and Oran's peaceful lives. 4 years later, 7 years later, 8 years later, 16 years later. We get to see a future where Karade and Oran live out normal childhoods and become regular adults. However, despite such a heavy change in environment, they still wind up similar to their other selves. They build a lot of the same relationships over again, follow their same general dreams, and act the same way. Although not on the same scale, they have still fought challenges throughout their lives. They still had to grow up. In the second to last scene, Karade tries to rename one of Oran's new projects. Naturally, Karade tries to combine her and Oran's names together. Karode, Oran, Oran, Karode, Kadode, Oran, Daeon, Demo, Demon. But she doesn't stop there. Karode continues to try to find a better name. Eventually, the slip of paper she's writing on is picked up by Hiroshi and is shown to the viewer. Directly in the center is the crossed out name, Doraemon. Demon. Daemon. Dormon. Doraemon. Doraemon. That's right. Dead Demons Dededede Destruction is heavily influenced by Doraemon. This isn't some crazy revelation. It's always been pretty clear that this story is basically a darker and more adult take on the core concept of Doraemon. An alien comes down to Earth and brings a bunch of tools that children end up using, and doing so teaches them valuable lessons that they use to grow up. It's the same premise for both stories. Dededede even uses Sobian as a parody of Doraemon, and it's brought up continuously throughout the series and holds significant importance in it. Yet, the name Karade crossed out isn't Sobian, and it's not Zundachi either. It's Doraemon. The name Karade is trying to find isn't Doraemon, but it's so very close. Dead Demons Dededede Destruction and Doraemon are two completely different stories, but at the same time, they are so incredibly close to each other. If the core concept they both start out using gets changed even slightly, they become so wildly different. And if Karade and Oren's lives get changed even slightly, they become so very different. And yet, at the same time, they manage to stay so similar. This is Dededede's final message to the viewer. Life's hard. A lot can go wrong in it, but a lot can go right too. No matter how the world changes around you, you're still you. Not every decision you make will lead to the best outcome, but live your life and enjoy it. The happy path you're looking for is out there, and you can find it. You always have the ability to find it. Just like in episode 1, the final scene is once again Karade and Oran talking to each other about their simple lives on a rooftop. The ending song begins to play, but this time we pan to the empty sky above them. As they laugh and enjoy themselves, their own voices begin to speak, but it doesn't come from either of them. As they walk back to their other friends, they find something on an empty table, a volume of Sobian. As they open it up, together Karade and Oran give the final line of the anime. Yes, and still, we will continue living, so long as you remain by my side. Even though they might just be visitors, the other Karade and Oran were also able to find this bright future. Because they kept living. I love the ending of Dead Demons Dededede Destruction. It is easily one of my favorite endings of any anime I have ever watched. I could not have asked for anything more perfect than what we were given. I've seen a lot of people online have mixed feelings about this ending, saying that it was rushed or felt anticlimactic. I could not disagree with anything more. I think a lot of people were always waiting for this story to become something that it never was. Dead Demons Dededede Destruction isn't about an alien invasion or the world ending. I mean, it kind of is, but that was never the actual focus. This is a story about learning how to grow up. It's a story about making connections, and it's a story about persevering through hardship to find happiness. The ending we got perfectly reflects all of that, and, in my eyes, it truly is a masterpiece. I started this video talking about what an anime has to do for me to consider it a favorite of mine, and I mentioned how Dededede is a reflection of myself. I adore everything about this anime, from its themes to its characters to its production. If I had to point to just one anime that came out in the past 5 years or so that most accurately summarizes my taste in the medium, I would probably point to Dead Demons Dededede Destruction. It has everything I look for in anime, and on top of that, its messages and way of storytelling resonates so very profoundly with me. I guess what I'm trying to say is, to me, it's absolute.